It's the people that are like really interested in reading all the email. When you get indicted for trafficking and then you order 6 drums of sulfuric acid right away, are you really worried about your reverse osmosis plant right after you get indicted? I feel like you're going to jail.
Directly at the emails that have been widely circulated pertaining to the age 11, and I have it written down on my notes, the permission to kill email.
How are these people communicating with them? Are they doing it through the dark web? Are they doing it through forums? Are they using code?
For me, I have 9 children. At the time, I left the government at 6. And so I can always identify the age of a child with one of my own children. And what my mind was almost automatically doing is I would superimpose my own children's faces and persons onto these children.
Imagine you're Joe Rogan. You've heard every crazy story. You've interviewed every kind of person. Nothing shocks you. Then someone slides a document across the table, a purchase order, 6 drums of sulfuric acid, placed the week after an indictment for sex trafficking. You look for the innocent explanation. You find one. Then someone asks one question. Where are the orders from before the indictment? And the innocent explanation disappears. That's the moment this story starts, and it only gets darker from there. Joe Rogan does not shake easily, but there is an episode, a conversation most people scrolled past, where you can watch him go from skeptic to silent. Not because someone told him something outrageous, but because he started reading the actual documents himself, court filings, federal reports, emails entered into the public record. And what he found in those documents was not a theory, it was a pattern. So here is the question this story is going to force you to sit with. If the evidence is public, if the court records are available to anyone, why does almost nobody know what they say?
Who Joe Rogan is and why that matters. To understand why this story matters, you need to understand who Joe Rogan actually is. Not the caricature, not the meme. The man who built the most listened to podcast in the world by doing one thing better than almost anyone else in media: staying in the skeptic lane. Rogan has spent years being careful, deliberate, consciously resistant to the pull of easy narratives. He knows what happens to credibility when you chase a story too fast. He has watched it happen to others. So when the Jeffrey Epstein files started circulating, when researchers and former federal agents started pointing to coded language in emails, unusual purchase orders, private islands with no surveillance infrastructure, Rogan's first instinct was the right one. Slow down. Find the innocent explanation. Because not every strange thing is the worst possible thing. That is the starting point. That is who he is when this conversation begins. And that is what makes what happens next so difficult to dismiss. Because Joe Rogan, the most publicly committed skeptic in American media, runs out of skepticism. He hits a wall, and the wall is made of documents.
Let's start with the purchase order. 6 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid, ordered by associates connected to Jeffrey Epstein's private island. Ordered shortly after Epstein's federal indictment on sex trafficking charges. 6 drums of acid, right after the arrest. When this detail surfaces in conversation, Rogan does what any honest thinker should do. He looks for the counter-explanation. Does the island have a desalination plant? A water treatment facility? Yes, apparently it does. Sulfuric acid is used in reverse osmosis water treatment. That is a real thing. It is not made up. So Rogan holds the innocent explanation seriously. He does not dismiss it. He gives it room. That is what intellectual honesty looks like. But then someone asks the question that breaks the explanation open. If the island has always had a water treatment facility, where are the sulfuric acid orders from before the indictment? If this is routine maintenance, there should be a pattern. Years of similar orders. A paper trail of basic upkeep. But the record shows the order appearing after the arrest. Not before, not regularly. After. And that is the crack. Because an innocent explanation only works if the behavior it explains is consistent. This behavior is not consistent. And Rogan, the skeptic, the man who told everyone to slow down, lands somewhere he did not expect to land. It looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, he says. It's probably a duck. 5 words. But in those 5 words, you can hear exactly what just shifted inside his head. The reasonable explanation required assumptions. The darker reading required almost none. But the sulfuric acid is just the beginning. Because once that crack appears, once Rogan's skepticism hits its ceiling, everything else he reads lands differently. And the emails are next.
The language in the emails.
These are not leaked documents. These are not anonymous tips posted on a fringe website. These are emails entered into federal court records. They are part of the public docket. Anyone can request them. Anyone can read them. And in those emails, one word keeps appearing, in context that no reasonable reading of that word can explain. Jerky. Beef jerky is stored cold, walked to specific people, sent overnight, rationed in measured portions, kept in the downstairs freezers, requested by name, described in the same breath as visits to the island, discussed with the specificity of something that carries real weight. Why does jerky need to be walked to someone? Why does it need to be kept cold? Why is it stored in a downstairs freezer in 6-bag quantities and rationed in specific ounce portions? Rogan's conversation circles this, trying to make beef jerky make sense as beef jerky. It keeps failing. This is clearly a code, one participant says. Walking over beef jerky. And this is not just the reaction of a podcast host. A sitting member of the United States Congress reviewed the unredacted files. She reviewed the emails on the congressional record and said on the floor in her official capacity, "Nobody talks about jerky like this." A member of Congress, on the record, saying the same thing Rogan is saying on his podcast. At this point in the conversation, Rogan asks the question that everyone eventually asks when they trace this far. How does something this large operate for this long without being exposed? How do you coordinate across that many people without leaving a trail that law enforcement can follow? The answer is documented. Not theoretical, documented.
The method used to communicate was deliberately engineered to leave no trace. Multiple people share a single email account login. One person writes a message, saves it as a draft. Do not send it. The other person logs in, reads the draft, deletes it. No sent message, no received message, no metadata trail, no record of transmission. A message that exists without ever moving. This method has been documented in terrorism investigations, in organized crime cases across the world. It exploits a specific legal gap. Surveillance tools are built to track communications that travel. A draft that never leaves an inbox is invisible to standard monitoring. Everything up to this point has been about architecture, methods, documents, the anatomy of a network. Now it becomes about the children. And this is the moment where Joe Rogan's tone changes completely. His team pulls a US Marshals report during the podcast. Not a fringe website, not an anonymous tip. The United States Marshals Service. 72 missing children, recovered in a joint federal operation. Indiana, Iowa, Ohio, Georgia. In just a few weeks. Rogan's reaction is not outrage,
Not at first. It is something quieter and more devastating. And then the numbers are broken apart because not all 72 are confirmed trafficking cases. Some are runaways. Some are children removed from abusive homes. The US Marshals are collecting all missing and endangered children under one umbrella operation. There is a number, a documented number, federally reported, part of the public record. That makes 72 look small. 85,000. That is the approximate number of unaccompanied minors who crossed the US southern border over a recent 2-year period and were released into the country with no confirmed, verified, safe destination on record. Not kidnapped, not confirmed trafficked. Released. Released into the hands of sponsors who were not DNA verified, not background checked, not vetted beyond basic paperwork. By this point in the conversation, Joe Rogan is not processing anymore. He is furious. Not in a loud way, in the quiet, controlled way that is actually more unsettling. Because it means the emotion has moved past the surface and settled somewhere deeper. And his fury has a specific target. Not the traffickers, not even Epstein. The media. Why is this not a bigger story in mainstream news? I don't understand why you're not seeing this on CNN. This is not every day. 72 children rescued. A blip. 85,000 unaccounted for. Barely covered. Epstein files unsealed. Buried under other headlines. And then Rogan zeroes in on the mechanism. Not just the failure of coverage, but the active replacement of it. We lose track of who the real enemy is. Not Ellen. That's dangerous, being mean to your assistant. What we care about is so bizarre. It's a symptom of how sick we are as a culture. That is the mechanism laid bare. Human attention is finite. Every hour spent on celebrity outrage, who was rude to whom on a television set, on drama that generates clicks and heat and social media engagement. That is an hour not spent on 85,000 missing children, on coded language in federal court records. US Marshals operations recover dozens of trafficked kids and receive 3 paragraphs in a local news brief. It is not just that the media fails to cover the story. It is that the media actively fills the space where that story should be with noise that keeps the public distracted. The question this leaves us with. The court documents are public record. The flight logs are public record. The US Marshals rescue operations are reported. The congressional testimony about coded language is on the record. None of this is hidden. It is sitting in the open. Which means the question is not whether the information exists. The question is why a man with one of the most powerful media platforms in human history had to read federal court documents on a podcast for millions of people to hear about it. What does it say about the institutions that are supposed to tell us these things, when the most important stories of our time are only being told by the people those institutions have spent years trying to silence? And what does it say about us if we keep scrolling anyway?